You guys are all ready? Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I wish to call to order this committee of the whole meeting at 5:30 on May 24th. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet thought on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates, and notice a video recording. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Looking for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor? Opposed, carried. I don't have any announcements today, so we're going to move right on to the reason we're here today. A couple of reports. So we will first receive a presentation from the developer, Mr. Bosman, on Monado Development Company regarding the proposed development. Following that, the Director of Community Planning will be invited to present. The committee will then have an opportunity to ask questions and discuss the proposal. Following this, the committee will receive input and questions from members of the public. Okay. I would like to invite Mr. Chris Bosman from Monado Development Company to the podium. Welcome, Chris.
Are we in? Hey, okay, perfect. Well, thank you for having us back. We don't have a really elaborate presentation. We did do an open house last week. I believe we've spoke to most on council. And so I am happy to do sort of a synopsis or a rundown if need be. I'm also happy to kind of just get more into a question and answer kind of discussion format, whatever best suits council.
I'm okay with that. Is any questions from anybody at this point? No? Okay. You had a good turnout at your open house?
Yeah, we have. It got a little bit tough to actually get an exact tally, but we're sort of in the 65 is our kind of best estimate.
Perfect.
And about 30 comment cards were sent as well. So.
Awesome. Well, that's good. Okay, then moving on. I'll turn it over to the Director of Community Planning. If you want to make some comments.
I'll just grab the mic and share my screen here. Similarly, you have the report that's in your agenda gives just a bit of a overview of some of the background and some of the issues. Here we go. So again, I haven't prepared a presentation. I think council has seen the overview. It's a 212 unit housing development, a mix of types of housing that's being proposed on the 25 acre site at Monado Road. And some of the issues that we had sort of added some context to are access and circulation, servicing. This is early in the review of this proposal, and so the committee of the whole format is a good time to sort of flesh out some of those questions and provide some feedback to staff and the developer as before it gets into the bylaw process. So one of the areas I think that I'd touched on where I suspect there may be some questions is around the affordability. The proponents are proposing a high percentage of attainable and affordable housing, and as I describe in the report, that gets into the question of, well, affordable for whom and what does that mean? And it really, it's a chance to talk about some of those potential details. But perhaps if sort of, rather than walk through the proposal and repeat what's in the staff report, I certainly could answer questions or try to as best I can and see if there's any in the minds of council members.
in the minds of council members. Oh, God. Everybody ate? Everybody ate tonight?
I'll start it off.
Do it.
So this is probably a question for Chris. So at the public hearing, which was great, at the open house, sorry, a lot of affordability and questions about affordability came up. Are you preparing to commit to an affordability, and is that something that you would have in front of, like, before the public hearing?
So the topic of affordability is a tough one at this stage, and I'll be really honest. We are committed on the rental side to do 10% to BC Housing Affordable Standard. So that's a defined, basically 30% of gross annual income based on the community's census average income. Divide that by 12, and that gives you. You take your gross annual income, multiply that by 0.3, divide that number by 12, and that would equal a rental rate. We can do that on the rental side of it. When you get into the ownership side, it becomes a pretty difficult conversation to have at this point. Mostly when you start having to talk about, is it $2, $3, $5 million worth of offsite civil upgrade? Are we putting a new road in? Are we not? And all of those things have to get flushed out to actually come up to like finite numbers to what unit counts are. So the goal of the project, and this is as sincere as I can be, is for local people. It's for the community. It's meant to work within the numbers of sort of average incomes and working families in town. But today, I just couldn't actually answer like a townhouse is going to be worth or go on the market for X dollars.
So I will just piggyback on that. So to staff, how would we ensure that some of those houses do stay affordable?
Do we have a second microphone, or just have the one to bounce back?
We're just going to swap. So there's a couple different, there's different mechanisms for ensuring that it's affordable. Generally, to hit an affordability for a certain household income, there's something involved on the title of the property limiting the for sale or the rental price to ensure that it sort of stays there, and that there's lots of examples of that, and usually there's a third party that would oversee that kind of agreement. There were elements of that with the Lot 13 affordable housing development. You'll recall some lengthy covenants that spelled out rents and increases, which really to allow things to increase with wages and the cost of living as opposed to whatever the real estate market is doing. I did put together some slides here. I'll just sort of to get to the sort of question of, we have done some work on what is affordable in Ucluelet, and this is from the housing needs assessment that was just done this last year for the West Coast, and these are the Ucluelet looking at the median income versus the cost of housing. So that orange line is showing over how 10 years that the median incomes are, and this is really calculating it out as what can the average household afford, is that orange line. So it's fairly stable, but really only in the last couple of years we've seen this divergence where the actual price of homes in the community has really sort of stepped away and increased very rapidly. And I think as you'll recall, with the consultants were talking about, that this is not it's not unique to Ucluelet. It was really surprising how quickly that has changed in Ucluelet compared to some other communities. But when we talk about affordability and median incomes, and this is 2015 stats because the 2021 census, we only get that data in mid-July this year. But it has gone up slightly. So this is that green bar of the median household income for all households being around $62,000. It may be more like 65 or somewhere it's increased a bit over the last 5 years. But I would just point out so that when you start talking about median incomes, that average is for all households. So like the bar above here is the lone parent economic family. So a single parent, it's more around 45,000, for example. And this was a graphic from that Lot 13 discussion of affordability. So this is the scattering or the distribution of incomes for households within Ucluelet. that shows, and we added in the liner showing where is that 100% median income is that sort of $60,000 to $70,000 household income, and that 80% median is right about where that sort of single parent household of 45 to 50,000 in there. So that's sort of the distribution of what households earn, and then the issue of affordability is we just sort of pulled out here, for example, if you use some of the numbers of what single family homes and condos are selling for in the free market, and that's that change, that divergence of the two bars in the graph earlier was where households have sort of stayed in the same distribution in terms of their income. The price of housing has really moved out. So the little blue polygon out here, these are the households in town that can afford, the $800,000 home that is common on the market now, and that if you're making in the sort of 125,000 or more, that's where that like a condominium selling for $550,000 is affordable to that group of people in town. There's not much else for sale in town right now on the free market. So what that really means is that the market prices have moved. They've sort of moved beyond most of the community in terms of what they can afford with their household incomes. And this really is why that sort of policy of aiming for 75% non-market housing as a target with new developments is really necessary. That was one of the major conclusions of the housing needs assessment, is that the market has kind of moved on and is serving that higher end just fine, but we need to find some other possible solutions. So if you look at that sort of distribution of incomes, it gets into the conversation around what's affordable versus attainable. That definition of affordable housing is often, the CMHC talks about, what's that 80% median income, and attainable, I think is, sorry, I'm going to go back one slide here. You might think about it as if CMHC sort of aims at affordable being this 80% median income, there are all these households between there and, what the market is right now building housing and selling housing for. That's maybe the attainable side of something that a UCLUELET household can get into, but it's could be priced higher than what CMHC and the typical affordable housing looks at. So we took and just did a rough, what if we were looking at the rental housing and what's shown in sort of the distribution of sort of the smaller, because they have a great mix of both rental housing, but also attainable family homes, and in the sort of darker blue, the number of larger, like 2-bedroom townhouses and single-bedroom smaller townhouse units, that if those are attainable, so maybe that meets a range. So we just sort of earmark saying, okay, well, if their rental is maybe 60 to 100% median income, that's like a $40,000 to $65,000 income household that's renting in there. If your single-family homes that are attainable are like 150% median, that's $100,000 household income. So that's a starting point. Again, this is not the formula that works one size fits all, but I think something like this needs to be kind of the next step of the conversation about, well, what do those mean? The math on that works out to, that rental housing would be somewhere in the $850 to $1,400 a month. And again, the units for sale, the homes around 450, the 2-bedroom apartments or townhouses about 300, and the single bedroom about 250. And as I think everyone will notice, that's not what is being offered for sale in town today. That it's quite a different. Certainly there were people probably in town who would be lining up at those sort of prices, but somewhere in there is where the discussion, I think, needs to go. And I imagine Mr. Bosman probably has some thoughts on where this goes. As I said, this isn't a formula that must be met, but it needs to be sort of a starting point of discussion of what are those rates.
So when you talk about the prices, I think there's two kind of elements that need to be looked at. Just knowing quite well current construction costs, those numbers would be really challenging to adhere to. So what, like a big strategy that we're using is working with groups like CMHC, BC Housing, and their different programs, to try and get, to try and get, approaches that get people into houses. AHOP through BC Housing is a big one. CMHC has some different versions of that. We're also looking at private market systems similar to the AHOP, that allow people to get in and, may not be 100% ownership, or there may be like a government-backed secondary mortgage on it. But then that reduces substantially the portion they're paying on, and it does allow them to get into the market and still build some equity. Now, the big kind of trick to all of this is that you can't really get too far into those discussions with those groups until you're into the development permit stage. So it is a bit of a chicken and the egg game. We are having meetings, like we have, as far as going all the way up to the Minister of Housing to talk about this project in the next 3 weeks. There's a lot of interest at the provincial level. There's also interest at the national level, about what we're trying to do here and some of the creative approaches we're looking at. But at the minute, those are just conversations, and we really can't get any kind of a letter of intent or formalized approval from those levels of government until we're into a development permit stage, and they know that it's a project that's going to continue to move ahead.
So that's great. Those conversations are being had, but how at this point can we ensure that there's going to be some affordability in this project? I know you're trying, but where do we stand? And this could be a question for Bruce. Where are we now?
I mean, from our side, I agree with Bruce that, some kind of covenant, some sort of, something on the land title within the zoning, needs to happen, and we're 100% in favor of that. That's past my level of expertise, and I would have to pass it back to Bruce as to how that's actually written and implemented. I know in other municipalities there's fairly clear pathways with, that have housing authorities or other projects like that, but I think we're kind of breaking new ground here, so we probably have to chart a bit of a path through some of that.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Councillor Hoare?
Okay, feeling a little green today. So thinking about the park dedications and the park, the Shoreline Park and the edge of Monotto Road, are those going to be covenanted onto the property? So
the Shoreline Park, Wild Pacific Trail extension, our initial conversations with planning is that we would actually give, I forget the exact acre count, but that would become district property. And that could happen, that could happen as rezoning if need be. It could happen at development permit. We're open to that. We had some very quick conversations about potentially retaining that and having some sort of like use agreement, and but the liability gets a bit tricky, and it just seems the clean approach is just to hand it over to the district.
And so the whole point is that the trail is going to connect, right? So I'm just thinking about how it would connect to the existing trail network or future trail networks.
So this map doesn't show it great, but the strip of land up peninsula there, that's actually part of our property. And so that connects across to where the ancient Cedars Loop is currently. It actually goes north of it, 50-ish, maybe 100 meters, somewhere in that ballpark. So I know there's some discussion about potentially moving the entrance of the trail there to a slightly better spot on the highway, potentially building some kind of a parking area, a little bit of infrastructure there. So we envision that being the main kind of connection point. And then my understanding for sort of future expansion beyond our property is that the best outlet is actually at like Monotto and Peninsula approximately, because then there's various city-owned property on the other side of Monado that would connect through to Seaplane Base.
So I know in the original development with the previous owners, there was some discussion about parking at the end of Monado for the connections. So is that sort of parking still on the board? I mean, I'm thinking about the trail. There's not a lot of parking for the trail. There's all the people that park on the side of the highway, and we all know how many problems there are with that. So I just don't know what's in this one.
My best answer to that is I think some clear discussion around Monado Road needs to happen. And is that the access point, or are we doing a bit of a realignment of Monado Road, which is one potential item we're looking at with engineering right now? Once those items are all a little bit more advanced, I think it'd be quite easy to, say, oh, we could put, X parking, here or there, and kind of design that into the offsite civil design.
And one more that's not so green. So I'm thinking about the proportion of the short-term rentals, the 47 waterfront properties. And I know it says in there that, somewhere in there, I believe, that some of them might have like a rental in the underneath. And I'm wondering if that's something, because short-term rentals, it's a lot of short-term rentals. Feels like a lot of short-term rentals, and I worry about the community feel. And I'm like, if there's actually somebody who lives there full time, I'm like, if a company bought it, for instance, they might have a staff person. That staff person could be in the basement, and then, they're people that were coming to, I don't know, learn to surf if it's one of the surfing companies. Like they could be coming and using the short-term rental, but then you'd have somebody underneath, and I get hesitant about whole house rentals. So I kind of like the idea of there being another component. It's not really a question.
No, it's fair. It's maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that. On the waterfront vacation rentals, is the hope that these units would be sole purpose for nightly rentals, or would that be the primary use? I guess would be the question.
The hope is not, actually. The hope is that it actually gives sort of if you look at housing in a continuum, you have, sort of government subsidized at the very bottom and, single family home up at the top. And the kind of design intent here is to give everything above subsidized housing on one parcel to allow a continuum to take place, and the likelihood of a community to build across economic boundaries. At some point in here, though, with the volume of rental, with the intention of the amount of affordable we're trying to do, we do need some market units. And there's no question that nightly rental zonings definitely bring an increased value. So it's something we're happy to work with, planning and yourselves on, as far as how we figure out those metrics. And is it whole house nightly? Is it more the suite is available nightly, or what are those percentages, and how do we get it to make sure that the community feel is maintained properly?
Which pretty much is, you're looking for, what do we call that, VR2s then, Bruce? Is that what that is?
There's different sort of formats within our zoning, the VR2 or 1, or just the single family that allows B&B, that the bed and breakfast use of up to 3 bedrooms is we've seen numerous situations where homes are being built with essentially those sort of earmarked or constructed to purposely be nightly short-term rentals. So there's a, I guess what I'm saying is, within the zoning there's a range, and depending on how much support there is for how many vacation rentals. I guess at this sort of early stage, that's sort of one of the questions, is that I think in our report we figured it's like 14%. This overall. We'd looked at a sort of low growth scenario of growth in the community, and I think this overall development is about 14% of what that sort of projection was, and that sort of balance between the housing and the tourist accommodation with those 47 units would be about 14% as well.
Okay. The last line there talked about amenity of 3,000 phase one, and then a second. What is the amenity? I wasn't. Is that like a park?
So if you look here, why don't I put my board up so I can point and not trying to point across the room.
No, it's all good.
So if you look about here,
Right.
we're calling them amenity buildings, and really what they are is like an open air structure. In the back of the rezoning package, there's like a design inspiration pictures. So kind of think of like a really fancy barn. And we started seeing them in other communities, and myself, like I've used them to hold our daughter's birthday party at. You know, think concrete picnic tables, undercover, a dry area. It's not a big burden to the community or the strata because it's an outdoor space. It's not an indoor space. It's accessible to whoever. They're pretty easy to keep clean. They're super robustly built to take kids parties and that kind of stuff. So we're kind of leaning towards that direction of just providing some really good community gathering spaces.
Okay.
You mentioned strata, Chris. Can you tell us a little bit more about the strata? And I thought this was freehold, but it's a strata development, is it?
There will be an element of stratification for sure.
Okay.
More likely than not, it'll end up being like a bare land strata with freehold kind of dwellings on top of that.
Thank you. I have a few questions for Chris regarding the tsunami flood hazard. Most of the site has been mapped for tsunami flood hazard, and just wondering if your engineers are certain that you'll be able to subdivide the property to create all the lots that you're showing currently.
So the great thing about engineers is they're always certain that they can do just about anything you want. It just comes down to cost. So we're working with a coastal engineering firm and our geotech right now to do quite a bit more detailed modeling of what the tsunami risk threshold would be there. And then really it's going to come back to probably the next time we meet, because we're looking at between 2 and 3 weeks, we should have pretty detailed reports back on that. And then it'll kind of become a question of more UQLIT's risk threshold as a community. And is it a 1 in 1,000-year event, 1 in a million-year event that we're looking to protect against? And then from there, we have to take that and determine what is the best course. So whenever engineers are looking at risk, they look at we know we can't kind of guard against everything because at one point everything on Earth went extinct. And so then we have to look at what the risk threshold is, and generally they look at that in terms of like events per duration. So 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100, 1 in a million kind of horizon.
And just a follow-up to that, it looks like you're planning to develop the lowest land in the later phases. So what if the zoning and development approvals focused on the high ground for the first 2 phases, I guess?
So our discussion with planning is pretty much what you've outlined. We envision from a rezoning standpoint that what we're calling phase 1, which is sort of the higher ground, and phase 2, the lower ground, would be rezoned as one item, with phase 2 areas or areas within the tsunami control elevations having a covenant put on to the title at this stage, requiring either additional engineering or additional works. And I think a big part of that is we will likely, again, probably be working alongside yourselves to take the interim tsunami risk policy and probably convert that into a formal long-term policy and then make sure the project meets those requirements.
Great, thank you.
Very quiet.
Yeah. Not because I wanted to be. Sorry. I went through this and maybe I've missed something. And I'm probably going to ask a question that might be out of left field or might have been right in front of me and I can't see it. And I'm really sorry, Mr. Gregg. This is coming at you. What about the mapping of flood risk is different in this than is in Lot 13? Sorry.
Nothing. It's that the areas and the colors here are subject to potential flood hazard from tsunami. That's essentially what they're showing on this map where they've overlaid their proposed development. The colored areas are showing depths of water from that modeled wave. So really the white area, that's where some of the, that the rental housing and the sort of white part of the site that's down towards Peninsula Road, that's, I guess, what we've been sort of loosely referring to as high ground, where it's outside of that mapped area. So what Mr. Bosman is referring to is having their engineering team looking at doing that additional engineering to see, okay, what would it take to meet a standard for this to be able to be approved with that known hazard. That's something that we're not aware of others who've gone down that path. This is kind of new ground.
Sure. So to be clear, what you're saying is everything that isn't white would then have to be built to a same standard as what we're requiring Lot 13 to.
Yes, the same, that interim policy that council looked at and endorsed in late March, I guess it was. It really opens the door to potentially engineering a solution here, because really the default is from the guidance, if you'll recall, from the province and what the approving officer needs to consider creating new lots in those areas where there's the colors on the map of the potential hazard. Really today the answer would be no, that would be rejected. Without something else that would hit a standard of assuring that it will be safe. So that's where the engineering work comes in to prove out, can it be made safe?
Perfect, thank you. And I would like to, Mr. Bozeman, I would like to thank you because all of the rendering photos and everything, this is all really well done. And Mr. Gregg, and thank you. I'm good with that.
I'm very supportive of this. Again, it's very isolated in an area where there's not a bunch of neighbors. I think we keep talking about density. Obviously, we just did a review of our OCP, and it's funny, spells like just 3 or 4 months ago, we asked, we'll go low growth, and what does that look like? And then you walk in the door about 6 weeks later and say, hey, what does this look like? For a lot of people in the rest of the community, they may not choose to want to live in this because they like their freedom of their bigger backyards and et cetera. But, if done right, people are going to buy into something knowing that it's higher density. I'm happy to hear some of the amenities that you're talking about. We're checking off the boxes for regarding the shoreline and protecting it. We're not putting a marina down there and causing a bunch more, more activity on the water, keeping people on the trails. I think, when this does get through and however this looks, obviously it does put other pressures in our community. We just have two new schools being built, and they were built for numbers that are current here. So, those are other headaches that, that we really don't have responsibility for, but the reality is we do contribute to that additional pressure when we make decisions based about increasing density. So, things that I would be really interested to know as we work through this, when you work with staff, is, what kind of density bonuses are potentially available towards the district, ensuring that, to offset some of the costs that we're going to incorporate here, and that could just be additional parking. That could be I don't know what else is out there. I guess parks and ambulance. The clinic's been capacity of everything, and I think we know it's coming, and but the reality is. It's trying to work with other groups and other agencies that we really don't have the ear of, you know, just the post office alone, where, you know, where's the post office box is going to go? Oh, poor Debbie, she's not going to like that. But anyways, but seriously, you know, we know we need this. It's the tranquilness of Ucluelet, I think, can sort of be maintained, knowing that it's not going, you know, on U Street or Victoria Road. It's going on other parts which people are, you know, pretty much purchasing into. What's that?
It's just growth.
Yeah, it is. It is growth, and you know, and when we talk about the apartments and renting, sorry, I know it's just you just kind of napkin sketched a few things here, but you know, when we talk about 70 possible rental units, rental housing, you know, you just use the actual size of 500 square feet. I'm assuming that's just an average, because in that rental unit you're going to have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bed in bedrooms, right? So you know, it's as you work through this, obviously, you know, we need more 2 bedrooms, we need 3 bedrooms, we need people to grow in place, and if you have kids, you shouldn't become homeless. You know, I'm very supportive of what I'm seeing here. I think this is something that, you know, it takes. We've been at the table for almost 4 years now, and you know, we've been desperately looking to work with a developer that wants to work with planning and provide a variety of housing options. And one of the things for us here, when we talk about vacation rentals, as we do have a lot of them as secondary uses. When we start looking at primary uses, one of the struggles we have is they all pay the same property tax in town, and so we just need to make sure that gets captured somehow. And you know, we dream of working with our CFO here about, you know, through business licensing and stuff, to ensure that nightly vacation rentals, in particular VR2s, that they pay their portion towards the community. Because, you know, it's one thing having a neighborhood where we raise children in, but it's a different thing if you're selling a house to make money. I'm much of an advocate that they need to pay a lot more than they're paying right now. I know that we won't get that sorted out today or in the rezoning, but it definitely, you know, we need to even the playing field a little bit. I'm babbling there a little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just take off on your
Yeah, do it,
babble.
do
Is
it.
that I will concur with what you just said, and if you could put a bow on a package, it would be that there was no zoning that would be allowing nightly rentals. And if people just want to have a big old beautiful home in a big old beautiful place and contribute to the community the same way the rest of us do, then that would be my bow ask. If you could, yeah. We have way, way, way too many.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think what's a good solution to answer that question is if we go back and do a little bit of an economic study on the site and show, and we haven't done this yet, so I actually don't know what the outcome would be, but show, you know, like, so that, let's just go 0 nightly rentals and see where that lands as far as the viability of the project and what that then affects. It's something I'd be happy to look into, happy to come back to council and sort of just show what the scenarios are. Because there is an element where you do need something at those higher values to offset, you know, sort of the community part of it as well. I've very recently been working as a consultant on a project on the mainland that started out with like a very high community approach, and they kind of went that way, and the net result was actually it ended up being much more of a market development. And I'm not saying that's what would happen here, but I think it would be something worth looking at and to be able to review and actually speak to with data behind it. Does that make sense?
I don't know how much work that would entail, Mr. Bozeman, but I would really appreciate, I honestly, and people I've been talking with who have moved here recently, and they don't have to work, and they have really beautiful oceanfront places that don't involve nightly rentals, and I do believe that market of people is out there, and we have no inventory, so we don't really know what that looks like. And so if it wasn't a huge, you know, burden or hurdle to...
It's a big project. It's not a burden. Don't worry.
Yeah. Or you could have a secondary dwelling, but it'd be a long-term rental and not a short-term rental. I mean, that's
That's what I was
what I've
trying to
always-
get.
They're getting
at
excited.
earlier.
Look at that, huh? Whoa.
dwellings, that's
Yes.
thing.
I'm happy to look at it. I'm happy to put just look at it from the business case study. With all things development, it is a business case. There's metrics that have to be met to achieve financing. There's metrics that have to be met to achieve, BC Housing or CMHC capacities and fundings and programs. And so I just don't want to say yes today and then be like, oh, we said yes, but now we can't do any of it.
No, I get that.
Well, you could see how much it excites us up here, and I'm sure the rest of the community. So.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's needed because you can easily just put 5 houses here and have big driveways and 3 big garages, so it's needed, and I do appreciate the amount of rental housing that you're trying to put in here, and but looking at that, just to change topics a little bit about access, in your plans you talk about on a road, and then obviously with Weyerhaeuser and Mr. Gregg there, obviously if Weyerhaeuser comes back to the table, and where's that potential of that intersection being on Peninsula Road, and maybe you can just elaborate a little bit your thoughts about that.
So I apologize, I don't know his last name, but James from the engineering department. And I spent a couple hours on site last week because there's been some discussion with both planning and engineering to have what I believe would probably be the primary access road coming in through here. And if you look at Peninsula, loosely somewhere around here and somewhere around here is the 2 humps, and that's kind of the plateaued section. I think in the OCP, approximately right there is where Weyerhaeuser is looking at coming in. We looked at it very briefly with the traffic consultant and then with engineering on site. It's not a great spot. It's quite blind in 2 directions. So this is very early days. Like, this is 2 days ago that we had this discussion on site. We're looking at potentially maybe like wiggling Monado a little bit south. It appears that Weyerhaeuser owns property across the road there that they could potentially come in, and maybe that becomes the primary intersection. I don't have any more details past that because honestly, we were like
No,
an
it's
hour
good, Chris.
into looking at it.
I just, if you don't mind, I just, for me, I like the Monado Road because, we're looking at phase 1, we're looking at rental housing, we're looking at attainable housing, and then we throw the main entrance into the whole property there. And I think it just, when we talk about attainable housing or rental housing, I don't think they should enjoy sort of the same tranquility as their neighbors down the road. So I'm a big advocate, and I know I don't want to go against the traffic studies and stuff, but at the end of the day, seeing an entrance off where they're, that lines up with the Weyerhaeuser lands, I just see apartment buildings where they'd have a continuous traffic going through, not to mention, it would just really, I think, add unnecessary traffic to an area trying to access phase 2, unless I'm looking at that wrong. But I would just encourage the people going to phase 1, they're purposely going there and not having to go through phase 1 to get to phase 2.
There is quite a bit of room, like as far as highways, right-of-ways. Our current traffic study says it's not required, but if it was an added safety benefit to put sort of left-hand turn lane in, like, because I know the concern right now is mostly if you're coming from Tofino side, you're potentially waiting for cars to come from Ukilet, and you're kind of sitting at the bottom of a little hill. It is a 50 zone, but we all know that not a lot of people go 50 through there. So there is some other options, like if a realignment of Monado is not viable, our traffic consultant has some other sort of safety measures that we could start exploring as well.
I just want to add some weight to the fact that I live on Helen Road by 52 Steps, and I can do my drive at 7:55 in the morning, because it only takes me 2 minutes to get to work, and I need to log in at 0800. So at that 5 minutes in the morning, as you roll through town from the high school on, I can tell you how many people I see walking, biking, and driving in those last few minutes to get to work for 0800. That I look at that many houses with one access to be going out onto Peninsula as being a real, like, you're gonna have to leave 10 minutes early because you're gonna be lined up. Anyways, that's it's a real thing, and it's amazing who you can see might be late that day for work, and who you didn't see might be the early bird and the keener that morning. Thank you.
Just a couple comments. I agree with Councillor Cole on that. It's a lot of traffic for one road, and having spent a number of years living in an affordable housing community that was a little bit separate from the rest of town, out on the endowment lands, I remember there being backup when we were trying to leave to go somewhere, and my grandfather would drive us because we didn't have a car, and we'd be sitting waiting to make that turn. So I like the mix of things here. I like the idea of it being a community. I think that's really important. And I've been a proponent for density, because if you put density in places, then you can keep green in other places. So, but I have a question. It is only referenced lightly, and it may be too early for anything more, but the impact of that many places on our water and sewer, particularly water in the dry season. Like, I know it says in the report from staff that it appears to be feasible, but I'm like, that appears to be feasible in the rainy season? Because that is a lot of impact on both water and sewer.
So what we know from working with Coors, who is the engineering firm who holds the District of Ucluelet's water and sewer models, we've contacted them. They've done an initial flow calculation just based on current capacity. And then we know there's water supply. That's actually not too concerning. Or at least there's water supply within the pipes that exist there. I believe it's outside of their scope of work or their scope of expertise even as to the capacity of water into the system from Ucluelet. That was definitely not reviewed. The sewer side, it's more complicated. Based on the information we have from Coors, the city's sewer system is running somewhere close to double capacity currently. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Their recommendation is that due to the size of this, that we should get some actual detailed data, do some monitoring at pump stations. We're happy to do that. But based on how kind of far over the line it is, we're making the assumption that more or less the pump station at kind of Monado and Peninsula definitely has to be replaced, and pretty much everything down Helen Road is probably going to have to be replaced. Economically, it's viable. I would assume that would kind of go against some sort of a DCC contribution or something that could be discussed in more detail. It's viable for us to do those upgrades and make those replacements. Where that viability falls apart pretty quickly is if the line capacity is not sufficient. It's thought currently that the line capacity is sufficient, and it's just the pump stations that are running inefficient. But if all of a sudden from Monado Road to the wastewater treatment plant, we had to basically cut a new trench and replace the entire level of infrastructure, it's 100% not viable.
Understandable. And a little sort of sideways follow-up that just occurred to me. Rainwater collection? Just thinking in terms of, if there's gardens, people have gardens, like there's things that you can, like ways you can mitigate some of your water use.
So the best use engineering practices now for multifamily developments is that all stormwater should be managed on site. We would adhere to those. That usually gets done through rain gardens, some sort of filtering, buffering. Potentially it gets a little bit complicated with the building code, but reusage through like waste waters, gray waters, that kind of stuff. But yeah, we'd be looking to kind of do 100% retention on site, or at least 100% management on site.
Thank you.
Interject. Sorry. We have James McIntosh, the Director of Engineering with the District of Euclid, that's just going to comment on the water and sewer. James, you could go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
You bet, James. Welcome.
Apologies I couldn't be there in person. I just wanted to provide a few brief comments on the civil servicing elements. So the 5 civil servicing for the elements for the site there, water being fire and domestic water use, sewer, sanitary sewer, storm, electricity, and roads. We've taken a high-level look at all 5 of those civil servicing. And what's been shared a little bit already, I'll just elaborate on. So for the sanitary sewer, as mentioned, it appears that the 3 lift stations, Peninsula Road, Hemlock, and Fraser, are near the end of their life and also near their maximum capacity. So to essentially add any development upstream of those lift stations, all 3 will have to be replaced and upgraded. And they'll have to be upgraded to a current standard. So that means adequate size and new pumps, new kiosks, and new electronics. So that's the bad news for sanitary. And then the sanitary lines, the service lines, have quite a bit of capacity in them and also useful life. In terms of water supply to the site, we recommend that at this point only theoretical studies have been completed. We recommend that an on-site analysis be reviewed in combination with the development progression. So as additional understanding of capacity and facility sizes is understood, it will better inform upstream capacity. In terms of electricity, we had a conversation with BC Hydro, and they've reviewed in concept the full development and have confirmed that there's a lot of electricity available in the system for the property. In terms of roads, quickly, we had a concern about traveling south on Peninsula Road and turning left onto Monado, that there's a blind spot there, and it causes an unsafe condition. Additionally, Monado Road seems to be out of line with our long-term planning for the area, and so we're not being prescriptive there yet, but we are looking for better ways to manage that infrastructure in that intersection, rather. Sorry. And then stormwater, on-site management is preferred, and water quality is what we're requesting of the developer to sort of prove out how that's going to be managed. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks for the thorough answers, James. Any other questions?
Just a comment. It occurred to me at the open house last week, which was really great. Thanks for doing that for the public. Because of the mix of housing in this proposal, it kind of works both ways. It can be a young family starting out renting something and then having kids and moving into a larger unit and eventually owning their own home. But it can also go the other way. It can be someone like me that would like to downsize, but it's going to cost me the same amount of money to downsize as my current house is. So what's the point? But this allows people to move both ways and still stay in the same neighborhood. So that's one of the things I think is really great about this proposal.
The point is less yard work.
That's a good point.
Put a little comment to that. One of the really nice things, assuming we continue to work with CMHC, is there are accessibility and aging in place standards built into their financing packages that we'd have to meet. And so that is one of the intents, to not just be families moving up, but also other people who are looking to downsize as well.
Oh, Greg, sorry, we're not there yet, but I'll let you know when you can make your comments. You'll have your time.
Stand by.
Any other questions from anybody?
I do. I
Yeah, go for
one
it.
question. I agree with density, but the waterfront houses along the waterfront, there seems like there's a lot of them. If you were to decrease that amount, wouldn't you get, if there was more green space, wouldn't they be more be able to get more money for them anyway?
No. Honestly, I don't know. We really haven't looked at, like, from a business case standpoint, too far past from what we've ended up with. Again, it's something we could look at, like if there was 20 instead of 40. How does that affect the numbers? How does that affect the overall project?
I think it would be good if we could maybe have a little bit of that with the business case scenario that we were already talking about. It'd be great.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah, well, we'll open up the floor to a few of them. So, a couple questions. If you don't mind, Mr. Ralston, just go up to the podium there. Just say your name and your address.
You've done it before. You could do it.
That's right, Headstock. It was cannabis, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Hello, everybody. My name's Greg Ralston. I live 338 U Street, 52 years in town. Before you start building something this large, have you considered the fact we have only one ambulance, that the doctor's office is shutting down, and we don't have a hospital for that many homes and whatnot? One twisted ankle at Big Beach takes our one ambulance away, and I don't know, looks like quite a few bunch of folks up there. Have you considered that aspect of, we need more medical service? And our fire hall is also up to 60 years old. We're going to need to rebuild that. And before you do any kind of new water piping into that, what about the sinkholes in town and taking care of the community before building and expanding? Take care of what we have before you start expanding upon our village. Not town, not city, village.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if you guys have taken that into consideration, the medical services and emergency services. That's a big chunk of
Yep.
to take care of. So, thank you.
I don't have all the answers, but definitely those are very live conversations for us. And did you want to answer a
can I
couple?
just make a
Yeah, go make a
comment?
couple
Fireball thing?
to brag about a
Yeah.
couple things that are going on.
Yeah, no, I just want to make a comment in that I completely appreciate, thank you, Greg, like it's a big deal. But I do think we need to stop and recognize that the provincial service, as in the provincial government of BC Ambulance Service, and even up to the feds and how things go that way, will, if you build it, they will come. And there will be these gaps, and believe me, I'm the epitome of a gap analysis. So there will be these gaps, but I am confident that as far as my world goes, that we're preparing right now, and we're literally in this last week have come up with some solutions which I haven't shared with anybody, which is another conversation. We certainly are preparing for, a matter of fact, I sent the employer the OCP today. We are preparing for the next 30 years in our next move, and not just where we are now and fixing where we are now, but the fix will include the growth over the next 30 years. So I can sit here proudly and say that. These may be some dark days, and but I'm feeling confident moving forward that this too shall pass, and we'll keep working and hard as we can until then. And I appreciate what you said. Sorry, your secondary point.
The fire hall, you could talk about the grant for the fire hall.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is upcoming. So the idea of the grants that are being sought right now are for actually a new build that is not just for now, but also has the future builds in mind and the size and capacity. So that's being looked at right now as well. And that is, you know, if that comes up for replacement, which we all know it is, and the timeline is not set yet, but that is anticipating not just continuing the regular service that we have, but increasing the capacity to accommodate things like the growth. And I guess my final note is that the growth, you say we need to take care of who's here now, and I completely concur, but we also need the money to be able to maintain our current infrastructure by expanding. And growth is actually inevitable, but if we do it in the right way, everybody will benefit. Because I know, as a homeowner, as you know, I don't have an extra 50 grand in my back pocket to contribute to our roads and sidewalks and everything that we need to fix right now. So we actually need it's happening anyway, so we need to embrace it and do it in a way that works for Ucluelet, and in a way that is the maintenance of the quaintness, and that's what we talked about in the very beginning. So I think sitting up here, that's always been our top priority, and don't you worry, because I won't let the health and safety of the community, that's not going to happen. Thank you.
You did a wonderful job. Thank you. And I have heard the quaintness. I haven't heard that from you in a while, so he's coming back up, huh? Yeah, they're definitely. Hey, Greg, I've been here only for 51 years, and I do agree. A couple of months early, but yeah, we agree with you, and that's the stand that we've always taken. And I think it's been a lot of work for us, working with staff and making sure that quaintness is maintained. So, and there's a lot of things. The shoebox that we inherit as a community, as a council, sometimes it's the inability of prior councils to invest in infrastructure because there's physically no money. Every economic downturn that's happened to this community every 10 years, we've all felt it, and hence why lift stations that should have been replaced 25 years ago are in the state they are, because there's been no developers coming to the area and not perhaps contributing the proper DCCs that a normal community would have had. So we got some sound staff and giving us some good guidance and ensuring that developers are looking after the foreseeable future of the community. So I know you cringe. Anyways, U Street will be quiet. Your school's almost built. You're going to get quiet around your neighborhood pretty quick, okay? Thanks for the comments, Greg. Are there any other in the room that would like to make any comments? Mr. Timbermans? Oh, man. Oh, that's he's putting you on the spot there.
Or passing the buck.
Yeah, I think he passed the buck, yes.
Barbara Schramm, 1958 Bay Street. I guess I'd like to talk on behalf of the Trail Society first. I understand the pressure to grow as a community, but on behalf of the Trail Society, part of our mandate is to look at the environment and to protect sensitive areas. And I want to express concern for that wonderful mud flat. It's very difficult to educate nightly rentals on an ongoing basis as to the environment. You have a lot better result with residents understanding a special place. But the density of, 47 short-term rentals concerns me. That's a lot of people. And when you say 47, how many people are in each one of those units? 3? So 100 people a day potentially not understanding the sensitivity of the mud flat is concerning. I do appreciate the offering of park land dedication for a trail corridor. That's a best case scenario, so that we're not having to wait to deal with the parkland as a community based on what the landowner deems their timing. So I really applaud that. That gives the community full access to park right up front. That's really good. And lastly, nobody has said the P word yet. Parking. I'm concerned about the increase in traffic and the existing traffic at that end of town not having anywhere to park. And I didn't see any parking lots. Maybe I missed them, but slight mention was given to pushing that up the road a ways. I would just encourage trail use being taken into consideration, because having people parallel parking on the highway is really unsafe. And to have it going down Minamato, I feel that will be overflow from the parking in the development itself already. So I don't know if there's a parking density already determined on this proposal. How many cars per unit? Is it that already considered? I don't know. But that's
further down the chain.
yeah, that's down the road. But yeah, so
Yeah, thanks for the comments.
protecting the land. Thanks.
Hey, Sam, maybe I'll just go over if there's anybody via Zoom or telephone that would like to please raise your hand, or is it, I'm going off memory, is it star 9? Okay, no, I'm just going off the script here, bouncing around. Nobody on Zoom? Okay, nothing, okay. Are there any other speakers in the room? No. So we've checked Zoom, telephone, any via email? Via community input at ecolit.ca? Okay. We're just checking 1 second there, Susan.
Hello, sorry for the delay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
We do have one email that we received a couple of days ago. If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and read it.
Yeah, please do.
It's entitled Monado Road Development and Peninsula Motel Expansion. Attention, Mayor and Council. I am strongly opposed to both of these developments. We live on a very special chunk of Vancouver Island. Geography limits, or should limit, what we should and shouldn't do with the land around us. Just because there is land that hasn't yet been cleared of its trees and other plant growth doesn't mean that it's a good idea to do that. We are at a point where or when we need to understand that we should expand no further. We need no more tourists coming here than we can already accommodate, and we need no more permanent residents. I worry that we cannot guarantee that we have enough water for any more people. Our infrastructure is barely adequate for our current needs. Do we have room for a larger sewer lagoon, even if we can put in more new sewage lines? Will our medical clinic in Ucluelet remain open? Even with support from Tonquin Clinic and the Tofino Hospital, our ability to meet the medical needs of the numbers of people we already have here, whether residents or tourists, is severely strained. Will we have a bigger co-op or a second store to bring in more groceries for more people? What about garbage, creating a need for more trees to be cut down to build a bigger landfill? The potential problems of increasing the numbers of people in this area go on and on. And what about the damage to our wonderful scenery and the wildlife that we and the tourists all enjoy so much? Further developments that reduce the wild areas for the wildlife to live in will create more human/wildlife conflicts, as well as reduce the numbers of animals that can survive here. There are many reasons to accept the fact that we, the town/district of Ucluelet, are as big as we should be, and staying this size is wise. Preserve the land and trees and other natural areas so we continue to be the beautiful area we are, for all of us to have available to enjoy far into the future. Or tear down the natural areas and build on the land and bring in the hordes and destroy it. Sincerely concerned for our future, Lori Crozier of Ucluelet. There are no other emails at this time.
Thank you very much. Did you want to say something?
God might make a statement.
Okay, if you wish.
Sure. I'm just going to say that something that is very apparent that is out there and is looming is that the province and the government are going to be encouraging in strong ways that there is growth. There's going to be growth whether it is managed or not. And so this is our opportunity to, in order for things to stay open and stay renewed and expanded, is by increased managed growth and managed in a way that we maintain our quaintness again. So we have an opportunity to do it on our terms in little ways and little steps where it might not always be on our terms. So I too would like to go back to 1982 and ride my bike around town and nobody else is coming here and there's 20 crummies zooming around in the morning taking guys to work and my uncle's going fishing every morning, but it's different times and it's a different world. So I think we need to manage the best we can for what's coming, and I'll just close at that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just, I've heard it a couple of times regarding land clearing. Just, and Mr. Chris, I'll pass it off to you. But when people look at the plan, I think there's a lot of people thinking that they're clearing for this. He's simply, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's already been cleared to that level. So the footprint that you're working on, it's already been cleared. And so it's, thanks for coming by, Greg. And so maybe you can just speak about what you're using and what's been cleared already.
Yeah, so when we purchased the land in September, it was predominantly cleared. Our design, working with our architect, has been hugely based around preserving what's left there. So we're doing everything we can to maintain trees of significance without cutting anything else down. So that's very upfront in our minds. We're actively working with some local conservation groups to figure out carbon calculations for not only the project that we're proposing, but for the stuff that has happened before us on the lot, and how to, best sort of offset or repay things that were well out of our control before owning it. So those are ongoing conversations that, as we have more details, we're happy to expand on and let everyone know what those are.
Thank you. Sorry about overlooking you there.
62. It's on. It's on. Even I can tell. I'm Susan Lee. I live at 1162 Helen Road. And I'm sorry, I'm just in the process of educating myself on the process of development, appraisal, and approval process, and beginning the process of learning what all proposals are in the works. So this is my question to council: is when a project like this comes before you, do you have a step in your, do you have a method of analyzing all the current projects that are proposed, that have been presented or in process, to look at the cumulative effect of everything that's sort of in the works or in the pipes for now and the few coming years? Is that a consideration?
I'm going to put you on. Yeah, it is. And I think the district has never had more information than it has now. And Mr. Gregg, I'm going to put you on the spot. Things like land use, growth potential, what that looks like. We know where our old growth trees are in the area. We know of creeks of concern. So there's a lot of information now in our new OCP that never existed before. Did you want to just make a couple comments?
Certainly, I'll try to address the question of sort of how do you follow the cumulative impacts and what sort of tracks that. There isn't a gauge that's counting as we go, and really it's with every development there is a question sort of, okay, does this fit? And that's kind of part of the role of that official community plan of saying, well, what's the plan over the next 30 years? And we have no way of predicting when someone will come forward with a large development or a small development, or that we don't control the timing of when these things come forward. But it's very much worth looping back and going, okay, how does this fit? How does this fit within what the community is envisioning? There was quite a discussion last fall with the OCP around growth and the rate of growth. We looked at different scenarios, and that lowish growth scenario that was really endorsed and embraced by council, I think reflects what the community sort of reasonably expects. So it's a good exercise to sort of go and say, okay, well, where does this fit? And that's where looking at, in the report, we sort of say, okay, well, 212 units and all, what is it? That's about 14% of that sort of piece. So this is a significant development for Ucluelet. It's not going to be built overnight either. I mean, I know it's intended to be phased. It may be 10 years, but a lot of that depends on a whole bunch of things out of everybody's control, including real estate markets and supply chains these days and everything else. So it's worth. I think if this is seen as the balance that really proposes a net benefit for the community, it's a big piece of it. That I think will also should be kept in mind when other things come forward. Like, okay, are they equally benefiting the community? If not, how much fits within that 30-year vision of sort of where we're headed? So it's a bit rambling, but I hope that puts it in a bit of perspective there.
Susan?
I just wanted to make a follow-on comment. Is just that I'm hearing that growth is considered inevitable, and perhaps it is. I'm not totally convinced about that, but I would like to make the comment that a lot of these, and again, this is coming from an uneducated perspective. I haven't done my research yet, but I know that a lot of projects are being applauded because they will solve our housing crisis or provide more infrastructure, money for infrastructure and improvements to the town. However, I just want to comment that what will happen is that our population will grow. I think you said it, you build it, they will come. So our population will grow, but in the end, it won't solve our problems because we're solving the problem in the short term. In the long term, those problems, the housing situation and stuff, will reoccur. It's kind of like when you have congestion on a bridge, so you build another bridge, and it's great for 2 years, and then 5 years down the road, both bridges are congested, and we'll have the same issue. Or if you build a secondary freeway because one freeway is too busy, eventually both freeways will be busy. I think the same thing will happen in terms of our community's issues and problems that we would like to solve. And that's just my observation, but I want to throw it out there.
No, appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Can I have a question? This could be a question for Chris. So speaking of what Susan said, so she said something about it won't solve what our problems are about our housing and so forth. But can you, temporarily, yes, but can you maybe talk about if in the future when these do come for market or for rent, that would you be offering these to locals first? Is that something that there's a big conversation of that?
So the conversation of locals first is a tricky one. I'm going to answer it like this. Currently, I'm going to say yes, because right now, pretty much the only people who know about this are in the community. It's not really outside of the community in a large sense. So if you were to sign up now, if you were to be in contact now, then absolutely, you're at the top of that list. it is a long horizon. Like the total project, if it, if magically today we ended up with a building permit, which is a complete impossibility, it would still be, 10 plus years until it was done. So I don't know, and I don't think there's anyone on earth who could tell you what that horizon period looks like as far as growth populations, immigration to the province, immigration in Canada. Is there another pandemic, supply chains, all of that? So it's kind of too far of a crystal ball to really say, in 10 years, is it going to locals first? Is there still a housing problem? Is there still a thing? But initially, yeah, absolutely. We are very much community minded and want to offer it to, sort of locals first. And I think there's another element that and I'm kind of taking my developer hat off. I'm going to put my resident hat back on for a second here, in that there's problems here right now, and a lot of those problems are really connected to housing. We talk about paramedics or, the medical clinic, and a lot of those problems stem from really struggling to attract people who need to come into the community to provide those services. And a lot of that stems from housing issues. And so, going back to what Councillor Cole said about managing that growth, I, as a resident and as honestly a concerned citizen of the province and the country, those are things we need to look at, and how do we use development in a positive way to attract, the right people to communities to continue to grow them in a good manner.
We just told hundreds of thousands of our viewers and followers what's happening, so now we're kind of, right? Sorry, my one last cheeky comment is
They got to get them in there once in a while.
I wonder where we are with the PO for the crystal ball, Mr. Greg? That's it, that's all I got.
Maybe it's a magic 8-ball. Just saying. I'm just going to make a comment about the mud flats, because I hear you, Barb. Like, you step on those mud flats, that footstep will still be there like years later, and it will kill things underneath it. I feel very strongly about mud flats. It was something that I spent a lot of time in my grad studies teaching about. And we would go back to the mud flats year after year, and I could see where I'd taught a particular thing the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, for the 5 years that I did it. So I do understand that, and I understand Lori Crozier's comments too. But if we don't solve some of this housing, and I get that it could be a short term, it might only be temporary, but we need that housing. We need housing for our paramedics. We need housing for people to work at the grocery store. We can't get enough staff to have the hours we used to have because there's no housing for staff. So we can't have another store because we can't even staff the one we have properly right now. So if we can manage that growth in as smart a fashion as possible, and there are days when, trust me, I'm dumb as a post. But we're going to try. We're going to try to ask the questions. We're going to try to do the things. And for things like the park dedication around those mud flats, we want to work with the Trail Society. I mean, I'm going to throw that out. There's no way we're not working with them to figure out how we can best keep people from just walking out onto that mud flat and causing those problems that we would then see a decade later, right? Yeah. So, sorry, feeling really green right now.
So you're always green. I would expect that. Any other questions or comments? No other hands raised from your Zoom callers? No other emails? Last round. Anybody in the audience like to make any comments?
I'm the yellow counselor because I really have to go to the washroom.
Okay. Well, we're almost done. You're almost done. And for me, I just want to see this get to the next step. I think there's this. We have an applicant here that's willing to work with the planning department, and I look forward to seeing some options so we can start getting through this. One thing I do know, there's there's a lot of more hoops here that they would need to get dropped, and they need to go through by the time we get to rezoning, by the time we get to subdivision, and I know that ourselves, sometimes we're the ones that cause the delays because we ask too many questions at the beginning, and we're already trying to figure out how wide the sidewalk is. So, you know, for me, I just want to see it get to the next stage. I think it's a timely project that needs to move along. We know that we've got another one across the street here, but all it takes is a delay of a developer. Next thing you know, the housing we think is going to be coming before the community doesn't show up for a variety of reasons. So I don't think we need to make any motions here today, but I just want to encourage yourself. I think we've heard a lot of good comments here today, and let's just get this to the next stage. Oh, back to the microphone,
Yes,
please.
go back.
Back to the microphone. Back to the microphone.
Yes, but.
It's all good.
Okay, again,
You're used to
excuse
that.
me if I'm being, this is an ignorant question, but
Yeah.
is there somewhere in the process where the community has input in terms of the
Absolutely.
the design of the
The
unit?
design, there's going to be further public hearings, there'll be public dialogue. This is a committee of the whole for us to have a fruitful conversation with that gives us the ability to speak a bit more freely amongst ourselves with the applicant and staff and hearing
Cool.
the comments. So
Great.
there will be a future public hearings on this.
So we will have an opportunity to try to perhaps avoid having any more Lefebvre style industrial cookie cutter ugly types of developments that don't really mesh with the
Yeah, but again, people are happily living in those
Yeah.
developments you say. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to, just because we live in larger, for those of us that live in the older part of Ucluelet here, we live and fortunate to have a yard space. Unfortunately, we need density. We can't make quarter acre lots everywhere. So
No, granted, I'm not arguing against that. I just mean, is there any input in terms of the design or architecture or style of the buildings? I'm not saying that we all have to have luxury homes.
yeah, visual. That'll come
Right.
before
Yeah.
The developer will work with the planning department, follow the guidelines in the
Yeah.
OCP. So they definitely have some goalposts they need to work between.
Good. Okay. I was just wondering
Yeah.
if and when that comes into the process.
Yeah, there'll be a lot more hoops.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions.
I think the nicest thing here is that Chris is a community member and not just a developer coming to town and then leaving. I think that makes
Yeah.
us feel like a little bit more warm and fuzzy, right?
As he's driving through town with his 2 crab traps strapped to his bicycle yesterday. I can't wait for those bike lanes to come into town, so. All that work for 1 crab he had to toss back.
Wow.
Okay, any more comments? No? Okay, so we're officially adjourned, and thank you for the comments and everybody that came today.
out.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned at 6:58.